Our next speaker is going to give us some insight into GDPR, what it means for organizations. And so, back to our fun facts. I asked our next presenter what her fun fact was and her oddest job. And her oddest job was making tiramisu, and she was doing that in her home kitchen. And she was doing it and selling it until her roommates objected and said they could not take the smell of eggs in her room anymore. So they said she had to stop. So I'm excited to welcome our next speaker to the stage. She's an expert in privacy, security, and risk. Let's welcome Forrester Analyst Enza Iannopollo. Enza? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's such a great pleasure to be in front of this audience. And as I was preparing for the day, I tried to think about you, what you do in your everyday job. And I know you do artificial intelligence. You do deep machine learning. You do the cool stuff with data. And so if you need to spend too much time with your security or your privacy teams, that's no fun. And if you have to listen to someone talking about regulation, well, even worse. I know this is not cool. But please stay, because this general data protection regulation will impact very much what you do every single day. And I'm sure that many of you are already familiar with it and are already tackling what it means for the way you work every single day. So we are going to spend the next 20 minutes to talk about this new regulation. Before I start, if you are wondering what's the weird accent, that's not a glitch of the microphone. That comes with the speaker. Bear with me, it's 20 minutes and I will be done. So I want to start talking about GDPR from Copernicus. I'm sure many of you remember from school, at the end of the 15th century, he published his theory, and he told everyone that actually the sun is still in the middle of the universe, and Earth and all the other planets just go around it. It took a very long time to get this theory to be accepted, not just by the scientific community, but also by common men and women. At the time when the Catholic Church was probably the only institution that they knew, the idea of the Earth in the center of the universe somehow was a reflection of humanity at the center of the universe. And so changing this idea meant that common people had to think again about their role in the world. And in some instances, I feel that GDPR is doing this to many organizations. It's not about security and legal and compliance. It's much more than that. It's everyone within an organization, because GDPR touches on governance, processes, people skills, and technology. So we are talking here about a very big change. And for many organizations that have started embracing this work, well, there is no way back. GDPR imposes more discipline and more flexibility in the way we handle data, the personal data of your customer or of your employees. And it's difficult to go back after you have embraced this new way of working. Just as just refreshing our memories, GDPR is this new general data protection regulation. The enforcement of the new rules will start on May 25th. There is very short time left at this point. GDPR covers all personal identifiable data of your customers, but also employees, so even your colleagues' data are part of this regulation, their personal data. And GDPR, yes, it is a European regulation, but don't think that it is a European thing only, because it applies to all organizations that do business with the European market, meaning selling products or services to the European market, or collecting data from European residents, maybe to build profiles. All these organizations, regardless of where their headquarters are, will need to comply with the rules. So really, in practice, we are talking about a global standard with the GDPR. Now, I want to share with you a few of the lessons that I learned working with organizations around the world as they comply with this regulation, with the GDPR. The first thing that I learned is that GDPR is an ongoing journey. Compliance with GDPR is an ongoing journey. Of course, there is a lot of attention on May 25th, because we know the enforcement is going to start. And very often, I see organizations just planning up to that point. And if I can get to May 25th and be ready, yeah, my work is done. But actually, that's not the case. The work of GDPR compliance is just going to start on May 25th. After that, organization will need to work every other day, just complying with these rules, building compliance within their processes. And I tell you this because actually regulators can just knock a company door any day and say, hey, I want to see how you are complying with these rules. So even organizations that don't have a data breach or actually don't have customers complaining about their data handling practices, well, still these organizations may see the regulators asking for evidence. And it means that you need to build compliance every day. You cannot prepare so quickly to respond to an audit. It has to be ready. And one of the examples that I use when it comes to talking about how GDPR is going to change business processes has to do with privacy by design. This is possibly one of the most complex requirements within the regulation. Privacy by design, it requires organizations to consider privacy and security risks from the very beginning of any new initiative, any new project that touches on personal data, and then carry that same attention throughout the development of this new project all the way to the delivery of the new project. Now, this is very, unpractical, but let's use an example here. Let's imagine that your marketing colleagues, they want to create a new app because they want to engage customers through this new digital channel. So on day one, your marketing colleagues will need to sit with the data scientists, their privacy and security colleagues, the developers, the people that are going to test the app, and actually tell everyone about the business goal that they are trying to achieve. But then the data scientists will help them understand what's the minimum amount of data that is necessary to achieve this specific purpose that you're trying to achieve. And the security and risk and privacy colleagues will try to explain, well, if we use personal data of customers this way, these are the potential risks that we are going to cause as a result, and this is the way we are going to mitigate those risks. And then you will have, of course, also the developers that will need to have the same attention and the same understanding of risks as they are developing the app. And this is true all the way to the delivery to the customers, where you'd want to make sure that if a customer wants to be forgotten, well, there is a way to actually identify and delete the data within this app as the customer wants to be forgotten. Similarly, if they want to know which specific data you are using about them in this app. So it's a way of working that, of course, implies mitigation strategies that have to do with security controls and technology. That's one part of the puzzle. But of course, it's also making sure that there are processes in place to make sure that an organization together, regardless of which specific team, but an organization together can work around GDPR compliance, creating processes for collaboration. In many ways, as it means changing the culture of the organization, bringing together people that have very different backgrounds. Sometimes they have very different goals, but GDPR requires that that organization works together to meet these compliance requirements. And look, it's not just what happens within the organization, it's also what happens with third parties. So it's the broader impact on GDPR, of course, is on third parties as well. And I like to say that, well, GDPR compliance, it takes a village. It's an effort of an organization and its partners to make sure that they comply with GDPR. And then finally, I want to spend just some time talking about risk assessment. And I want to do that because very often I hear, oh, GDPR is so uncertain. It's so vague. It doesn't tell me what I need to do to comply. And this happens because GDPR is a principle-based regulation. Think of it as almost the ideal state of risk mitigation that you want to be in. But the journey to get there is up to each organization to define, and it starts from the understanding of the risks. Now, when I talk about risks in the context of GDPR, of course, I'm talking about the risks then collecting and processing personal data of customers or of employees can generate. And compliance with GDPR means building mitigation strategies that, in fact, mitigate the risks to a level that is consistent with the requirements of the regulation. You need to understand those risks if you want to make sure that you are mitigating them properly. And it starts with understanding the data. Data discovery, data classification, these are very important elements of any compliance strategy. And if you're thinking that, well, this is the work of my security team, they deal with classification and discovery, it's not my job. Well, this is not the case, because your security team will need to give you guidance and helping you selecting the right tools to enable you to do this discovery and classification on an ongoing basis. And I tell you that because we don't only see this as a priority as we get ready for GDPR, but recently we asked a very large group of companies, what do you think is going to be the most important thing to do to maintain compliance after May? And again, the #1 answer was making sure that we do discovery and classification of data continuously. And this means having an understanding of risks continually and updating your mitigation strategies continuously. Now, one more thing that I want to say about these classification exercises, of course, we want to look at specific data type. We know GDPR covers the personal data of customers or employees, and this can be also sensitive personal data. So there are some data types that, of course, will fall within the scope of the regulation. But also it's important to understand the context of the processing activity. It means which kind of technology are you using. It means which third parties are you using within that process. It means which kind of insights are you going to get as a result, because you might be not collecting sensitive personal data, but the insights that you are going to achieve through your processing activity, those might be sensitive. And so the mitigation strategy has to account for it. And because you are the one who really understands those processing activities, you are the one who really understands the insights, you are the one who really have to help those security, compliance, privacy people to make sure that they understand and they see the risks and help you come up with the appropriate mitigation strategy. So that discovery and classification piece is really the starting point and also the key to keeping compliant with GDPR moving forward. But this is not just a big change for businesses, this is a big change for customers as well. And many organizations do see GDPR not only as something that regulators are pushing on them, it's something that in many cases customers are asking organizations to do. Look, we know customers have become so much sensitive to privacy and security breaches. This is interesting. 74% of customers said that if they knew that their bank or insurer has suffered a data breach, they would simply change. And as many as 47% wouldn't engage through digital channels if they had privacy or security concerns. I see so much investment into building these digital channels, and then it's interesting, if you're not paying attention to the privacy and security aspect, customers are not going to engage. And also, we have our online research community. We ask consumers, and this is specifically referring to the UK, we ask about GDPR. Now, luckily, consumers don't necessarily know there is the General Data Protection Regulation, but when we ask them about data subject rights, the right to be forgotten, data access, data portability, they do recognize these rights. And there is a clear expectation that they are going to use them. And they are going to use them because it's a means to verify how an organization is handling my data, is a means to build trust. And not just with one specific organization, but really trust in the way they use the internet overall. So there will be a lot in terms of customers using these data subject rights. And here are just a few things that I have seen organizations prioritizing when they want to focus on the way GDPR is going to impact the customer engagement. Of course, consent, data subject rights that we have mentioned, and of course, transparency. They want to know what organizations are doing with their data. It's a perfect storm. Regulators are asking organizations to change some of their practices to comply with these rights, to become more disciplined about the way they use data of their customers and employees. And on the other hand, you have these customers that actually they want to know, they want the answers when it comes to organizations using their data. In this work around GDPR compliance, I have to say that I came across some very interesting examples of companies that, yes, have begun this work for compliance reasons, but as they have progressed, they have seen the GDPR delivered a number of benefits, and this has to do with business value. Look at some of the examples here. The improvement of customer experience, this has been continuously mentioned as one of the benefits, but also better data strategies. If I'm forced to look into my data assets, if I'm forced to discover and classify them, it means that the many organizations have discovered that there was so much in terms of assets that they were not using, they were not exploiting properly. And this has been an opportunity to improve the data strategies as well. And then increase efficiency, privacy policy in their management, security policies in their management, but broadly data governance in general. And here are a few examples of companies that have pushed privacy from a compliance angle all the way to a business strategy, and this is Scania. It is interesting to me because, if you do trucks, if that business has to do with building trucks, you wouldn't think that, consumer privacy is the core of what they do, and I was very surprised instead to discover that actually there is a clear commitment to make sure that they account and respect the privacy of the customers in everything that they do. And the CIO with whom I spoke told me clearly, we handle so much personal data of customers through our third parties and for some of the work that we do. And of course, we are committed to protect that privacy. And then you have, this is interesting, he's the head of the digital customer experience of a European bank. And of course, he told me, GDPR is not my work. I deal with digital customer experience, but I'm just so grateful to GDPR because the discussion about privacy has become really a business discussion. My board, the executives, they are all talking about GDPR and privacy. And as a result, he was also given the task to make some research and understand how the expectation of privacy, or the privacy expectation of consumers is going to change in the next 8 to 10 years, and how the bank can change to make sure that they are addressing these demands and these expectations. And then I have another example, this time is from Italy, from home. Is Generali, is an insurer that has embraced privacy as a corporate social responsibility. Again, one example where it's not just about compliance, it's much more than that. It's the core value of a business, is really differentiating what we do, they say, and this is describing also the way in which we stay on the market. But we saw today many companies are still trying and get prepared. Our numbers told us that actually about 30% of organizations will be ready for GDPR, are ready for GDPR, but 70% have still a lot of work to do. And there is not that much time left. And because of that, I just wanted to share some key actions for, to take away. What can we do with so few time left? When I said that, and I really believe that the discovery and classification piece is essential, but because there is so short time left, we should take a look at some of the initiatives, data-driven initiatives that presents high risk. There is no time probably to really run and scan everything, the whole real estate that you have. Maybe we need to focus on some specific initiatives, and very often I see these being initiative or processing activities where sensitive data is involved, so the processing of sensitive data is involved, or where there are a lot of third parties participating in that project. Or cloud and analytics. These are areas where I have seen organizations feeling there is high risk, there is something there that we need to understand, and this is where we start our GDPR compliance journey. And it's very important to prioritize. There is not much time left, so decide where you want to start. And once you have prioritized, once you have chosen the key initiatives where you want to start your GDPR compliance journey, well, design a roadmap. if you are not the one designing the roadmap, make sure that you are strongly influencing the way the GDPR lead is designing the roadmap. And I tell you that because remember what we said at the beginning. A regulator can knock your door anytime and say, I want to see the way you are complying. And they will want to look at those roadmaps as well. It's important that an organization can show, we understand the risks, this is our mitigation strategy, this is where we started, and this is our progress. That will make a difference in conversations with regulators. And this means that the design of this roadmap is extremely important, and everything has to be documented as you go along. Deploying security controls and other technology, of course, this seems to be the place to start. Technology can deliver a fast start to GDPR compliance. Of course, we said it's not the only thing. There is governance, there is people skills, there is processes. But many organizations start from technology just to kickstart their compliance strategy. But of course, there are processes that they need to take care of as well. And if I have to tell you which sorts of processes I see organizations prioritizing today, I can certainly talk about consent. Because, and this is interesting from this audience as well, I think. In the past, I mean until today, and until May 25th, if a customer skips through a privacy notice or a consent notice and doesn't give you consent, you still get the data, because we understand that consent is given by default today. So you don't look at my privacy policy, great, I'm going to get your data anyway. GDPR just turns things around. If that customer doesn't take the time to go through the privacy policy and the consent notice, if that customer doesn't say, yes, I want you to use my data, you lost that data. So consent is extremely important, not because you need to comply with a regulation. It's important that your customers go through that and say, yes, I trust you enough to give you my data, because otherwise you have lost the possibility of using that data altogether. And similarly, data subject rights. We cannot think that data is an asset that we will deal with forever, that has to stay in our architecture forever. It's not the case anymore. GDPR forces organizations to define specific retention policy. But let me tell you, each data point has an expiry day, and that expiry day is not defined by you. It's defined by a customer, then tomorrow says, hey, I want to be forgotten. Go and find my data, whatever architecture you're using, whatever project you are developing, make sure that you are deleting that data, because I don't want to be part of that anymore. We have just to, as I said, it's about discipline, it's about flexibility in our data architecture, and that idea that data might go any day. Big change, and in general, also data breach notification, of course. That's another area where I've seen a lot of work going. And then finally, we need to get ready to really maintain compliance over time. A good place is, of course, testing the incident response plan. This is something that organizations are doing. Understanding what your third parties are doing. That's another big issue with GDPR. It's very important to try and develop the right auditing and the right audits to actually understand what these third parties are doing if I'm sharing my personal data or the personal data of my customers with them. Training and awareness programs is essential, but also prepare to demonstrate compliance. And again, this is not just a compliance or legal or security work. This is the organizations that has to get ready potentially every day to respond to an audit, and you have a very important role to play in that. And before I leave you, I like to share with you this quote. Good data protection normally enables organizations to do more with data and not less. And I see that many organizations, many data scientists, engineers, and all the people that work with data, they do think about GDPR as strong limitations, a strong limitation on what they are doing. They think that it's going to impede to run certain activities that you are running today. But that's not the case. GDPR just requires an organization to figure out what's the best way forward when I handle customer data, personal data of customers, and just keep doing what you are doing. In many cases, you will be able to do more and not less with this data. With this, well, thank you very much.